So I grew up in Rechnitz in Austria. It's 5 minutes away from the Hungarian border. It's very small with 3,600 inhabitants. And I do not really need to describe it because there's a wonderful play by Friedrich Jelinek that captures what I experienced where I grew up, which is unfortunately a very dark history in so many ways. So it's this experience of living with a past overshadowed by National Socialism in so many ways. But at the same time, it is, also a very typical Austrian place. Besides the fact we don't have mountains, but why?
I'm from Mannheim in Germany, which is about an hour south from Frankfurt. And it's, to the best of my knowledge, the only European city built in a block system. So there it is.
I'm from Pécs, from Hungary, which is close to Croatia on the southern part of Hungary. And Pécs is a very historical city in Hungary because we have a Roman heritage and some sort of buildings or nice places from all ages of Hungarian history. And we also gave the first University of Hungary.
I'm originally from the Eastern Shore of Maryland or Rehoboth, Delaware, but I identify myself much more as an Eastern Shore person. And I spent many years in Vienna, Maryland, and ended up in Vienna, Austria, just by chance.
I'm from a small town in Styria called Boek aan de Moer. It's quite a boring town, I have to say, and nothing going on. And I left there when I was 20 to study in Graz and then moved to Vienna. And that's where I mainly live since 2005.
I'm from West Lafayette, Indiana. It's where Purdue University is. And it makes it kind of a unique locale, I would say. It's a very large university and the town is probably about equally as large. So, between August and May, the town completely changes in some sense. But something that I've noticed about it is that it is a little bit bifurcated, that the university and the town, they mesh a little bit, but the meshing is not, ubiquitous.
I come from the beautiful city of Vienna in Austria, and I would describe it as the city with the highest quality of life in the world. And that's not only my opinion.
I'm from Lower Austria, and so the district is Make. Make is a beautiful, today Baroque monastery. So if you turn on the TV here and you see Viking cruises commercials, the first image is Make, and I'm basically from there. So it's Make and in the wine region Wachau. So we don't have a lot of wine in Pennsylvania, little, but it is not unlike here. Things are all blooming right now, and so for many Germans, they loved Pennsylvania for that reason. They came and they stayed, and when I interviewed here in 1992, my senior colleague, who is also here at the conference, he made sure that I only saw the pretty parts. And,
So the place where I am from is southern Hungary. I didn't live there for too long. It's hard to describe it. It's a very intercultural place, very close to Croatia. There are at least five different minorities in that city. One of them is the German minority, the Roma minority, of course, Croatian minority, and the Serb minority as well. And of course, there are Hungarian as well, and different subgroups of Hungarian as well.
From a small town in Upper Franconia in Bavaria, but I now live outside London in Berkshire. Do I have a favorite city in the US? I would say my favorite city, and this is maybe a cliche for Austrian, it's New York. It's for me as a theater scholar still the most exciting place when it comes to seeing interesting performances. And I'd say probably New York is my favorite city in America. But then there are other places. For me, Chicago is really important because it's close by for American feelings to Bloomington, Indiana. And then I also really like Detroit, which came as a surprise to me, but is also a great cultural space with great music and great art.
Yes, definitely San Francisco.
Why would you say San Francisco?
Because of the vivid poetry scene there and the connection to the beat generation, which which I'm working on since like 10 years.
My first stop in the States 25 years ago was in Chicago, Illinois, and I still have a soft spot for Chicago. So if I could ever get a job there, I would move back to Chicago in a heartbeat. Beautiful, great culture, music scene, and wonderful museums.
I have many cities in the US that I like, but I'm gonna have to go with New York, which is where I'm currently based and work. And I like it so much because of the huge cultural diversity.
And I think my favorite place is actually South Carolina, specifically on the coast. It's called the Low Country. It's very interesting there. There's a lot of different parts of society. There's the Gullah Geechee community. It's former enslaved people who have a very unique culture, I guess, because they were separated in many senses from the rest of society, even the rest of slave owning society back in the 1800s.
I really like Boston because that history lives next to each other with the skyscrapers, and the whole city is so decorative and huge. Also, there's the influence of the sea, so you can feel the waves and experience the big wind all the time. And also, it's just a very nice place in Massachusetts.
Probably the city where I am at any particular time seems to be my favorite city. But I discovered a couple new cities recently. Sacramento was a nice surprise. I like to go to capital cities. And where else? And Carson City was in Nevada. It was the other capital that we were going to.
Favorite place? I think if I would come back to the States and I want to live, I would choose again this place. I also find when I talk to Austrians, for instance, they say, where should I go? I say, you can do the cities, but by all means, you must do the national parks. You must be out in the countryside. And so, yes, they are favorite places, my goodness. Who doesn't like any of those phenomenal sites? I took an Amtrak trip from Chicago to Portland. Was that gorgeous? I just did hours and hours in North Dakota. Now, would I drive my car alone in North Dakota for maybe 8 hours? No. But in the train, it was phenomenal. Just see this vastness of the United States. I think that's what I like the most.
I lived in Los Angeles for almost 10 years, and I hated that city for 2 years, and then I loved the city for another 8. And what I loved about Los Angeles was the cultural diversity, the landscape, definitely. A lot of hikings I did when I was there. Yes, I am a big lover of national parks, so I could list up all of them.
Do you have a specific favorite national park?
Oh, actually, the Grand Teton National Park.
Currently, my favorite Austrian musician is the Austrian rapper Young Huan.
Of course, you expect now that I say Young Huan.
When he became famous, that was a relatively new thing in Austria. We hadn't heard that kind of music before.
If you like Madonna, you would like Nena.
For me, was always extremely important, and this is Helmut Qualtinger, who is in this great, Austrian tradition, comedy tradition. And I have to admit, for me, there is no New Year's Eve without Helmut Qualtinger. And this is still a great pleasure.
In Vienna, a great duo is Judith Schwarz and Lisa Hofmanninger, who are two young Austrian jazz musicians, and they're doing very exciting improvisational stuff.
Well, probably some Austrian ones who would like Wolfgang Ambros and Ludwig Hirsch, which would sort of be artists of my generation. They might be either my age in their late 60s, early 70s. Not real loud. And one of my favorite songs is about the Zentralfriedhof that Wolfgang Ambros sings.
My mother was a musician. Was she my favorite? Maybe, yes. She was not a composer, she was an interpreter. She was a pianist and a cellist.
Joseph Haydn. Yeah, I love classical music, and I think Haydn, Handel, Bach, all of these Beethoven, even all of these composers really speak volume.
At this day and age, at my age now, Bach is I turn it on when I write, So when I do my research and I just need to put it down on paper, I have Bach. I like it. It's calming, and I listen a lot to Bach. So I could say maybe Bach.
I live in Richmond, Virginia, and we have a wonderful independent radio station, and there we have every other week we have a German 2 hours. So we have a student, she's completely bilingual. She grew up in Berlin and Mannheim, and she's doing this. So there's a lot of new German music that I know now through her the last few years. So there's a lot of cool stuff. WRIR is the radio station. It's streaming. So if you ever want to listen to the German hour there, it's called German Jam. She called.
I love Ingeborg Bachmann and her poetry, but I'm also quite a big fan of Karl Kraus, who was a Viennese literary critic and who published his own magazine, Die Fackel, in the early 20th century.
I really like Mozart. I really enjoyed to walk around Salzburg a couple of years ago. It's so historical and everything is so connected to him there, and I can understand why he could make so great masterpieces over there.
What I admire so much about American culture is popular culture, actually.
This is too difficult.
For me, it's Patti Smith, definitely, but I also am a big fan of Iggy Pop.
So for me to pick just one is completely impossible.
One of my favorite composers is Ingram Marshall, also from San Francisco.
I really like how the American musicians reacted to the British influence in the 60s. So the Animals, the Doors.
You have to ask my kids. I mean, what they play, I kind of, interesting, right? It's not my thing, actually.
Well, I come from film studies, so I have a lot of favorite American film directors. So Howard Hawks, I would say, is my favorite American director.
Hollywood movie stars are, of course, very popular in Hungary. So I would like, for example, Quentin Tarantino.
My favorite, I don't know, I really like Billy Joel. And there's an Austrian connection there, actually.
Is what I'll take this into a different direction. I would say Mary Oliver. She's a poet from Massachusetts.
I have to say, now that you're saying it, I never really voiced this before, but I do like the 40s and 50s big band.
I have a lot of favorite Austrian films, TV series. One of my favorite filmmakers is Ulrich Seidel, and I always say watch In the Basement to get to know Austria. So I think Seidel is amazing.
Say that among my favorite Austrian movies would probably be Muttertag. It's about complex family relationships.
But there are a lot of TV series that were around when I was a kid. That are quite hilarious. Emma 24/12, no one knows this, it was on Austrian television for a while. But then also it's more of a docu-series, it's called Alltagsgeschichten and Liebesgeschichten und Heiratssachen by Spira, which is also, if you want to get to know Austria, I think you have to watch this. It really captured quite well what Austria is as a country. And then lately I have to say Braunschlag, Altes Geld, it's even on Netflix, so there is quite a lot out there that is amazing.
Maybe The Life of the Others, maybe that movie.
I became a total crime film junkie, and I think in the last 15 years I have seen I think over 1,000 Tatort films. In the last 2 or 3 years I've not seen as many Tatorts, but Tatort was for me a show that after a stressful day, I could go there. I could have another hour and a half of suspense, and then it was over with, and we knew who done it. And so that was good for my routine day. Tatort, which you could actually stream, and I've done a lot in Tatort Vienna, is what would be one of my favorites. Also, one that one of my colleagues has told about would be, is it Guten Abend Österreich, or I'm looking at Therese, Willkommen Österreich, which you can stream. So
I don't actually, because I don't watch, unfortunately, because I live in the UK, I can't access Austrian channels, unfortunately.
The most recent one I watched, actually for the project that I'm here for, was Angelo, and I talked to the director in an interview as well, Marcus Schleitzer or something like that, Schleitzer, pretty sure, and it was a very interesting movie. He takes the story of black Austrian, somebody who was taken out of slavery, was kidnapped, into slavery actually, originally in France, I believe, and then on to Austria as the kind of project, I would say, of this Austrian baroness.
No, I don't watch TV.
Not at all.
Enjoy watching PBS. Anything that the masterpiece. So whatever masterpiece brings, there's nothing that is a bad film, honestly, or a bad show. And I follow that, say in the Jane Austen, series and so on. So I enjoy that. I enjoyed very much the Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock Holmes. So I can't get enough of that stuff.
Well, if we are talking about big names, my favorites in the States are directors like Jim Jarmusch, Martin Scorsese, David Lynch.
TV shows, I have to admit, for a very long time I tried to resist American TV shows, and it was actually Elfriede Jelinek who made me watch American TV, because she actually said that The Sopranos are so great. And this was my introduction, and I started watching The Sopranos, and I still would say it's one of my favorite shows. But then also Mad Men. And right now I watch Treme, which is about New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina.
I really like Mad Men. The Mad Men, I understand why every season gets some Emmy awards.
Yeah, so I haven't had a TV in the sense of having connection to TV for a long time. But probably when I'm in a hotel, I always look for the detective stories.
The last movie that made a big impression on me is The Whale.
I don't even know if I have a TV show.
Oh God, I used to like Sex and the City. There's probably better ones. Actually, now Succession is brilliant, but yeah, and that's an American production.
I mean, I was really looking forward to the conference because it's always a nice occasion to come together, and I've missed so many of them during COVID. And I was really happy to see that so many old friends are again here, and that I will see so many people who I haven't seen for years. And I think I'm not the only one who mentions this, also to see how many young scholars came and participated in the conference. And I think the topic is just amazing. And I also have the feeling that it's a conference where I at least learned a lot about literature, histories that are usually not discussed in the context of Austria. Like, for example, Romani writers, and I was really excited about this.
Probably one of the number one things is just seeing old friends that I haven't seen for a long time. So that's always a big plus. But I'm always interested in the variety of topics, particularly with the younger scholars. I mean, I think that's one of the nice things, looking at the program and seeing how many names I don't recognize. So I'm happy that there are younger scholars, and I think the organization has really promoted that.
I was actually looking forward to some new ideas, definitely, and I'm happy to discover that the issue of culture, intercultural issues have become an important topic now. And I was looking forward to meeting some of my old colleagues and meeting new colleagues and trying to co-shape the conference for the future.
I hope that a number of these phenomenal talks will be put into print, because as we know, what's in print will stay. We remember it, we can reread it and so on, and it makes history. If it's just fleeting, So I hope that there will be one or two books that will be published and articles published. That is my greatest hope. Of course, for me personally, friendships. Over many years, these professional friendships were forged.
I'm interested in or like contemporary literature. I've seen some stuff about Jelinek, for example, which is one of my favorite authors. Excited to show my film tomorrow there.
Wonderful. The Austrian Studies Association is very welcoming, and I love these conferences here, just to be with like-minded people, just to talk with my colleague about some obscure filmmaker, talk about all kinds of different texts and how to teach them. Great. That is really wonderful, because in my daily life at a large public university, it's all about the money right now. So it's nice to talk shop.
I look forward to the comparative nature of the conference. So I think it's wonderful to bring together poetry, literature. I come from film studies, but also environmental studies, architecture, theatre. It's a beautiful, beautiful fusion of everything Austrian and Austrian.
I really like in this conference that's huge in the variety of the programs. So it's not just like listening scientific presentations. It's also like read-ups and movie screening and roundtables and so on. So whoever has an interest not just on the history, not just on the literature part, they are able to find a program for themselves. So, and also I'm very, very glad that I never been at the Lafayette College before, and just discovering the campus and the city nearby is just like, if it's possible that someone doesn't find the program what he or she likes, then the whole area is just a great place to discover.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the panel on Roma representation. And it's this panel specifically that interests me because I work at the Austrian Cultural Forum, and we are right now preparing a big exhibition on Roma artist Jaya Stojka, which is going to open on 23rd of May. And since that's connected to my job, I very much look forward to learning more.
A book? Oh my god. I haven't read a book cover to cover in just because of my job. So if I read for a living.
Yeah, currently I'm reading a book about psychedelic shamanism by Daniel Pinchbeck, who is from New York, which is a very exciting, fascinating book.
So actually, really, what I've read lately was actually Philipp Weiss, who is here at this conference, Am Weltrand Sitzen, Dimension und Lachen. I have to say it was for me one of the most exciting reads in a very long time. And otherwise, I also love to read letters, and I've read Gertrude Stein and Thornton Wilder. The letter exchange, which was for me extremely eye-opening, because Wilder traveled to Austria in the interwar period. And he described, what he could observe while Germany was already, ruled by Hitler. And it was interesting, how he actually, as the outside observer, what he said about the situation in Austria, and to also realize how blind he was for what will happen to Austria.
I happened to read interesting books recently on Alma Mahler. So Alma Mahler has been rediscovered, and she's been rediscovered in a sense that she is not the person as we know her from history, but an intellectual person actually who had a very difficult life. And there are several publications which came out about her. And recently, there have been a lot of different books on Sissi, and different movies and different series on Sissi. And one of my favorite one is actually from Elena Hell on Sissi.
It's a book.
It's a book. This is an advertisement. I know her personally.
Recently, we had here, right, in residence, she's actually of Ghanaian descent, born in England, came to Germany as a teenager, fell in love with the language state, moved back, got married,
and received one of the most prestigious awards for one of her first stories in German, because she wrote in English a lot. And then she switched into German, and has now written a novel, and I read her novel, and I fell in love with this Adas Raum, and the author is Sharon Todua Otu. And so that was very recent. I read that just last week, and I really, really enjoyed it.
So I recently read by BIAAS, somebody gave a talk on Shimon Schweigen, because I was going to go to a conference where that was going to be talked about. I really enjoyed that. My husband and I read to each other. We recently read Iris Murdoch's The Sea, which was good, but we've been doing this for over several years, and I would have to say one of the best books was Don Quixote's, and very funny.
I really liked 8 Days in May from a German author. It just translated to English a few months ago. I read it in Hungarian because it was translated to Hungarian previously, and it's about the last 8 days of the Third Reich, and every day is a chapter, and every chapter has individual little stories. Sometimes they are connected, so for example the leadership of Germany, but sometimes they are very excellent micro-historical stories, which discusses Austria or Germany, and also the American involvement in the Second World War as well.
It's not one book specifically, but I would say everything by Paul Auster.
And why is that, for those that are unfamiliar?
I just love his style of writing very much. Yeah.
So I read actually Obama's autobiography. It's called A Promised Land. It's about his first 4 years as president. He did 2 terms. And it was a very in-depth book about kind of his rise into politics. Originally he was a community organizer in the South Side of Chicago. He did work with the Catholic Charities, and then he went on in Illinois Senate, all this stuff, and then on the road to the presidency, and then talking about what it is kind of to be a president from the inside perspective. And I think it really opened my eyes to, we have all these political debates in the United States and all these expectations of what our politicians do. And it's very different to see from, it's his own curated perspective, but from his own perspective, what he thought he was able to do, what he thought he wasn't able to do, how he looked at different issues.
I read the Wolf Hall series by Hilary Mantel, but I quite like, again, reading Austrian writers. I checked some words. It's a biography about Karl Kraus, which I read recently, which is really interesting. But I haven't read anything contemporary, I must admit.